Welcome to the 15th video in this video series on building an e-commerce website using React, Redux, GraphQL, and Firebase. Now in today's video, we're going to be working on our product details page. As you can see, we will have our main product image, name, price, an add to cart button, and of course the product description. However, I will be showing you that in this tutorial, we will be adding a new Wysiwyg editor into our add new product form so that users can actually add rich text to the product description. Of course, you can add different styles. You could add different headings. So this is an example heading, ordered and unordered lists. They can even go into the source and write custom HTML. We've also updated our search page to actually allow users to click through any one of these products, either clicking on an image or the product name, to actually click through to the product details page. Before we begin this tutorial, please check out my official YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/simpletut, not only to find my other videos, but of course also to browse the official playlist for this series. Again, I'm posting a direct link to this playlist in the description of this video. There is an official GitHub repository for this project, and at the end of each of these videos, I'm uploading my code to this repository. So if at any point you want to compare your code with mine, or you just want to come and clone the entire project, then feel free to do that. Please like, comment, and subscribe. The first thing that we need to do is set up our new product details route. So to do that, what I'm going to do is head back over to my text editor, and within the source folder and pages, I'm going to create a new folder for my product details page component. So I'm going to call this product details, and that's just going to contain a simple index.js file. It's going to be a functional component, so we need to just import React from React, and then we'll create our function. So we'll say const product details, and that's just going to equal, as I said, a function, and we're just going to return a div for now. But what we're going to do here is just export default product details, and that will be enough for us to actually create our route. So I'm going to come into my app.js, which is where I am currently importing all of my page components and creating my route. So I'll say import product details from pages/product details. And then what I'll be able to do is come down, and where I've created my search routes, which are here, underneath those, I'm going to duplicate one of the search routes to save myself a bit of time. I'm going to update the path, and the path is going to be /product/ a new URL param, which is going to be product ID. And of course, I'm going to update the page component to render the product details page component we just created. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the path that I've defined for this route, but specifically I want to talk to you about the product ID, because this is really important. Now, as you can see, what we're currently doing on our search page is we're fetching all the products within our products collection in our Firestore. Now, what we want to do on our product details page is very different. We are only interested in one specific product, but of course we need a way of querying that. We need to know which product a user is trying to visit. So of course, each one of these products have a unique ID assigned to their document, and we're going to fetch that document via that unique ID, and we can handle that within our application by actually passing that ID as a URL param to a product details page. That will give us access to the product ID whenever a user visits this page, and that is how we're going to query it. Before we can create a component to render our product data, we need a way of actually going out and fetching it from our Firestore. So to do that, we need to write some Redux code. I'm going to come into my text editor, into the Redux folder, into products. I'm going to open up my products types file, and we need to create two new types. Now, of course, we're using Redux Saga, so we need a start action, and we also need another action and the equivalent type that we can use to actually set the data in our Redux store once we've gone out and fetched it. So we need two types here. The first is going to be fetch product start, and the value is going to be the same name as the key. And we also need set product. And again, this is going to be used to actually set the state within our Redux store once we've actually fetched our product data. So of course we've created the types, so now we need to create the equivalent actions. So what I'm going to do here is create my start action. So I'll say export const fetch product start. It's just going to take a product ID, and then it's simply going to return an action with a type and payload. The type is going to be from product types, and the fetch product start, and the payload is just going to be the product ID that we've passed into the action. And then of course we need the equivalent action that we can use to set the product. So we'll say export const set product. This is going to take a product, and again it's simply going to return an action with a type and payload. The type is going to be product types dot set product, and again the payload is going to be the product itself. Now of course, once our fetch product start action gets dispatched, this is the action that we want to intercept with our product saga. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my new sagas. So we'll say export, and we need to create a new generator function. So we'll say function with an asterisk that will create our generator function here. And then we'll say on fetch product start. And then what we'll do is we'll say yield take latest, and we want to reference our product types dot fetch product start, and then we need to pass it the name of the generator function that will be used to actually handle our actual action and our asynchronous code. So I'm going to create another generator function here. So we'll say export function. To create a generator function, we use the asterisk, and then we'll just say, we'll call this fetch product. And of course, this is going to receive the entire action and payload. So I'm going to destructure the payload. Now, of course, now within fetch product, within this generator function, this is where we're going to handle all of our asynchronous code. However, of course, before I write that, what I need to do is I need to pass fetch product here to the take latest function so that Redux can start listening for this action whenever it gets dispatched. We need to make sure we're exporting that at the bottom of the file here. So I'll say call and pass on fetch product start. Okay, so at this point, we're now ready to actually try and handle that asynchronous code. And it's going to be really easy. So I'm just going to have myself a try catch. So we'll say try, and we'll catch any errors. So we'll catch any error here. And of course, you could console log the error here, but for now I'm just going to comment that out. And within this try, this is where we're going to actually handle going out and fetching that from our Firestore. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to create a helper. So again, I have my products helpers file. We've already used that previously in some earlier tutorials. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this, we're going to say export const handle fetch product. It's going to take the product ID that we're going to get from the payload of the action, and then it's simply going to return a new promise. The promise is going to take resolve and reject, and then what we'll do is we're going to call our Firestore, which again we're already importing at the top of the file from our Firebase utility file that we created earlier in this series. And then we're going to call Firestore. We're going to target the collection, which is products. We already know that it's our products collection. And then we want to get the document within the collection, which is our product ID. That's going to return a reference document that we can call get, and that will then give us a snapshot. We are going to then take that snapshot and check if it exists. So we'll say if snapshot.exists, and if this is true, then what we're going to do is we're going to call resolve on our promise, and we're going to pass our snapshot, but we're going to call data, and we're going to call that function, which is going to actually return the data that we need. And of course, if there is an error, then what we'll do, so here we'll say catch, and if we get an error here, what we'll do is we'll simply call reject, and we will pass the error. So this is our helper function, and this is how we're going to fetch the document that we need from our Firestore. So now if I come back into my products sagas file, at the top of this file where I'm importing from my helpers I'm now going to import my new helper. We need to make sure we're importing that at the top. I'm also going to import a new action from my products actions, which is going to be set product, because we're going to need both. And then all I need to do is come back down to this generator function here called fetch product that we just created. And first of all, we need to fetch the product using that helper function we just created. So I'm going to call product. Well, I'm going to assign this, the response we get back, I'm going to assign it to a constant called product. Of course, we need to yield the response, but we'll be able to call our helper function, which is handle fetch product. And we're going to pass the payload to this helper function, which we know expects the product ID, but we know from our action, we know is the product ID that we want. So we're going to pass the product ID to our helper function that's going to return the product data. And then once we have it, we'll be able to call yield and put, which is how we can dispatch a new action within Redux Saga. And we're going to dispatch our set product action, and we're going to pass in the product. Now, of course, within our helper, we also have a catch here, and whenever we call reject within our promise here, and we throw that and pass the error here, this is why we have a try catch. So it would return the error here, and we could potentially log that out. But for now, I have that commented out. So what will happen now is when we call set products, it's going to dispatch our new action, which we created here, that passes the product. However, we need to now update our products reducer so that we can update our Redux store. Okay, so although we're calling set product and this is passing the product successfully, we're not actually currently updating our Redux store because our products reducer hasn't been updated to actually listen for that event. So what we'll do is we're going to add some new initial state for our product, and it's just going to be an empty object by default, but we're going to add a new case to our reducer. So we'll add product types dot set product, and when this matches, we're going to again return the state, but we're going to update the product with the action dot payload, which, as you can see from our saga here, is going to be our product. Okay, so at this point we've successfully fetched the product from our Firestore, but we now need a component that can actually render out our product details. So we need to create that. Now, you already know from earlier in this tutorial, we created our product details page component, but now we need a component, as I said, to render the details from our Redux store. So we're going to create a new component. We're going to call this our product card. So I'm going to call this product card. And again, of course, this is going to be a functional component, but we are going to have a style sheet. So I'm going to have styles.scss. And within my product card component, we're just going to import React from React. It's a functional component, so it's just going to be product card. It's going to equal a function. And for now, let's just return a div. We'll need to export this. So we'll say export default product card. And of course, we want to make sure we're importing that style sheet. So I'll just do that at the top. Styles.scss. Cool. And just to see that this is working, I'm just going to put in here test. Let's come over to our product details page component and render that out. So I'll say import my product card from the components folder. So we'll go into component/product card, and we'll just render the component. Now let's come over to our browser and let's manually enter that into the URL. So let's say product/a random number, which in this case will be an ID. Of course, we're not actually doing anything with this just yet, but that's enough to see that the route is working and we're able to see that dummy text that I put in there successfully. Now, before we actually move on, what I want to do is talk to you about how the changes that we need to make to our search page. We need to actually add links into this page that will take the user to the details page. And again, that's going to be really easy for us to do, but let's look at how we are actually going to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back over to our text editor. I'm just going to close these quickly. And we have our product results component. We created this in one of the earlier videos in this series. And I'm going to go into my index file here. And as you can see here, what we're doing is we're getting the products and then we're mapping through and we have a product component here. Now, at the moment, we're destructuring the values that we want to render. So that's the thumbnail, the name, and the price. And we're passing that to the product component. Now, what I want to do is I want to pass the entire product into the component because there's going to be another field that we want to use on that. So it's just going to be a little bit easier to pass in the entire object into the product component. Now, within the product component, what we're going to be able to do now is destructure at the top here, the document ID. So we're going to get the document ID, and this is the ID that we're going to use in the URL. So this is very important. So we also want to make sure that we only render this when we have the document ID, otherwise we will return null. And then what we'll do is we need to make sure at the top we're importing something from React Router DOM, which is the link component. And then what we'll be able to do is wrap the image with a link. We're going to set the to path to equal /product/ the document ID. And we're going to do the exact same thing for anything else that we want to link. So I also want to link the product name. So again, I'll say link. We're going to specify the to path. It's going to be /product/ the document ID. And again, we just need to wrap the product name with our link component. And now let's come back over to our browser. Let's go back to our search page. And you can see that the links have changed color. They're blue. And that's because these are now links and we haven't styled them appropriately. So what we'll do is we'll come back again to the text editor. We're going to go into our style sheet. We're going to find our name here. And we're just going to make sure that we're styling any links that we might have. So we'll just target the anchor tag. And we'll set the color to be black. Let's come back to the browser. You'll see that's changed. But now both the image and the name of this product is now clickable. And if I click it, you're going to see that I am taken to the appropriate address. So you can see it's /product/ the product ID. I can come back here to click on another product, and you're going to see that you get a different ID in the URL path. And this is the ID that we're going to be using to fetch the product data from our Firestore. Okay, so we're now ready to build our product card. This is where we're going to dispatch our actions to actually go out and fetch our product data. And we can do that now using the ID that we are storing in the URL params. So what I'm going to do is at the top here, I'm going to import a few more things. I need to import the use effect React hook, and I need to import some other hooks from two other libraries. The first is going to be the React Router DOM library, and I'm going to import use params. This is what we're going to use to actually access our the product ID we're storing in our URL params. So I'm going to say const, and we're going to destructure from URL params. We're going to call that as a function that will give us access to our product ID. We're going to be able to use that a little bit later. But of course, we also need a way of dispatching our actions. So we're going to import from React Redux. And we're going to import our use dispatch and use selector hooks. But of course, we don't have anything to dispatch yet, so we need to import our actions. So we're going to import that from our Redux folder, product, and our product actions. We want to import two things. First is our fetch product start, but we also want to import set product. Okay, and the reason for that is going to become clear a little bit later. Okay, so what we need to do now is actually dispatch our action to fetch the data. So to get access to dispatch, we're going to create a const called dispatch. It's going to equal use dispatch. We're going to call that again as a function. And then what we need to do is actually use our use effect hook to dispatch it. So we'll say use effect. That takes a function. It has a dependency array. And there is actually not going to be any dependencies. So this is only going to run when the component is initially mounted. But we want to call dispatch, and what we want to dispatch is our fetch product start. And as you can see from this action, this expects our product ID. Luckily, we have access to that here, so all I have to do is pass that in. At this point, we have dispatched our action to actually go out and fetch the data, but it's now going to be stored within our Redux store. So to access that, I need to create a map state function. So I'm going to say const map state. It's going to take the state, and then we will be able to get the product from our products, from our state, products data, and the product. Then to access that, all we'll need to do is call, so we'll say const product is going to equal use selector, and we're going to pass in our map state function. And then from that, we'll be able to destructure from our product whatever we might want. So in this case, I'm going to start off by just destructuring the product name. And I'm going to replace my dummy text here, which is at the moment test, with a h1 with the product name. Okay, so let's come over and test this in the browser. I'm going to click on one of these products. Okay, and I'm not seeing anything on the page. I should be rendering out the product name. So let's look at the product data. And you can see that we're not actually getting anything in the Redux store, which suggests there's something wrong with our saga. So I'm going to go to my product sagas, maybe my helper. Okay, so this was a bit of a gotcha here. I have my collection here in my Firestore. I said it's product, it's actually products. So let's look at this again in the browser. I'm still not seeing anything on the page, but it looks like I'm getting the product data now. So my Redux store has it, but you can see that it's within product. So actually, if I come back over to my index, I need to destructure product from the response from the Redux store. So I should now be rendering out, as you can see here, the product name. So if I was to come back to search and click on a different product, let's say product 6, you'll see that I render the correct product. Okay, so at this point, we're pretty much ready to actually build our page and our product details component or product card component. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a div. I'm going to give this a class name of my product card. Within this, I want to have my main product image. So I'm going to have another div here. I'm going to give this a class name of my hero. And that means that I need to actually come up here and destructure from product. I need to destructure the product thumbnail. Now, once I have that, that will give me the source URL for the image. So I'll create a new image tag. And I'm just going to pass the source URL, which is going to be the product thumbnail. And then I want to render some details under that. So I'm going to have another div. And I'm just going to call this product details. So give that the appropriate class name. So I'll say product details. And within this div, I'm going to have an unordered list with list items. The first list item is going to contain a h1, which will be the product name. I'm already destructuring that up here, like that. Underneath that, we're going to have our price. So I'll create another list item, but we'll need to destructure the product price here. So under product name, we'll say product price. And again, we're going to render that here. That's going to be inside of a span. We're going to have the currency symbol followed by the product price. And underneath that, what I want is to actually have a add to cart button. So I'm going to import my shared button component. So I'm going to import my button from my forms/button component. But what I will need to do is I'll need to create a config object. So I'm going to create const config add to cart btn equals. We're going to pass the type, which is going to be of type button. And then what I'll then be able to do is under my price, I'm going to have another list item here. And this is going to have a div with a class name of add to cart. And within that, I'm going to render out my button component, but I'm going to pass in my config object. So config add to cart button. And the text inside of the button is just going to be add to cart. Okay, so that looks pretty good. But what I also want to do is just add some basic styling to this component. So again, we have our product card wrapping class, which I'm going to target. So I'm going to target my product card. I'm going to be setting a max width of about 800 pixels. So again, I'm using rems, and my root font size is 10 pixels. So I can divide any number by 10. That will give me the equivalent rem value I need to assign. So 800 divided by 10 is 80.0 rem. That's 800 pixels. I'm going to set a margin of 0, auto, and I think 100 pixels. So again, that'll be 10.0 rem. I'm going to target my hero image, which is that main product image. I'm going to set this to be display block. I'm going to set a width of 100%, and I'm going to set the margin of it to be top and bottom 20 pixels, which is going to be 2 rem, auto to center it. I'm also going to target the actual image element, and I'm just going to make sure I set this to be display block and a width of 100% and a margin of 0, just to make sure that is how I want it to look. And then I'm going to target my details, so I'll say product details, and I'm going to target the unordered list, the list items as well. I'm going to reset the margin and padding to 0 on those. And then I'm going to target the list items. I'm going to set the list style type to none. And I also want to set the margin on these to be 0, auto, and 0 on top. I'm going to center it, and I'm going to set 10 pixels on the bottom. I'm then going to target the H1. I just want to set the margin to 0 on that. And then finally, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to target my add to cart class. That was the div that I wrapped my add to cart button in. And I'm going to just set a max width on this of about 200 pixels. Okay, So I think that's about it. Let's come back over to the web browser now. Okay, so the Add to Cart button is not inherited the 200 pixels that I had previously assigned. So I'm just going to check this again in the code. Okay, so I misspelled the class. I wrote card instead of cart. So let's return again to the browser, and you'll see that the Add to Cart button is more appropriately sized, but otherwise this looks great. So, okay, so that looks a lot better, but there's still something that we need to do that's very important. I'm going to open up my console, and I'm going to come away from the detail page. Now, what I want to show you is the current state that we have in our Redux store for our product. So you can see that we are currently storing the last visited products data, even though we are no longer on a detail page. This is going to lead to a UI bug, because if you notice here, if I come over and we're on product 1, if I come over to the search and I click on a different product, you're going to see that there is a jump. You saw that switch to product 3 from product 1. So there's a bit of a jump between the time that it takes for us to get a response from our Firestore with our new product data and update the content on the page. For a split second, we're actually displaying the previously visited products data. So to fix that, what I'm going to do is, as I mentioned previously, I also imported setProduct. This is the action we use to update the product state within our Redux store. Now, we're using the useEffect hook to dispatch our action and fetch the product that we want to see on the page. But the useEffect hook also allows us to return a function, and this is used in a similar way to component will unmount. It's used to unsubscribe from event listeners and various things like that. But what we're going to use it for is to dispatch another action, which is going to be our setProduct action, and we're going to reset that back to an empty object. And what that means, if I come back over to the browser and I open up my console again, as you can see, currently in our Redux store, we have our product data stored within our state. If I now come away and I go to our search page and I check our data again, you're going to see that our product state is empty, and that is what we want. Okay, so at this point, you can see that we've successfully built our product details page. We are displaying the product data on the page. However, you might feel like something is missing, right? Because really, we're displaying the same data that we have in our search results on our detail page. I would expect to see something more. And what I'm thinking about is text, a description, information about this particular product. Now, at the moment, we are not storing that kind of data within our Firebase documents. As you can see here, the data that we're storing is just really name, price, thumbnail, category, and other relevant information like that. So what I want to do is I want to add a new field, which is product description. And I also want to allow an admin, when they're creating products, to use a Wysiwyg editor to actually create more rich HTML content effortlessly. I'm going to come back over to my terminal window, and I'm going to install a new dependency. So I'm going to install npm install ckeditor for -react. Okay, I'm going to install that dependency, which is going to take a few seconds, and then I'm going to restart the application because we're going to need this dependency going forward. Okay, so once that's done installing, let's do npm start, and that's going to restart our application. Of course, we now need to actually use it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over to my text editor, and what I want to do, so the first thing that I want to do is just show you in the browser what we're going to be doing. So I need to log into the application, so I have a test account. So it's admin@admin.com, enter my password, and I'm going to come back over to my admin. And what you're going to see is that if I go into add new product, all I currently allow users to do is add the category, the name, an image, and a price. I want to add a new field, which is going to allow the user to enter a description. And I'm going to use the Wysiwyg editor, CK editor, to actually allow the user to do that. So what I'm going to do is come back over to the text editor. I'm going to close all of these files. We don't really need them right now. And I'm going to go into my admin page. And this is where we are actually building our add product form. And we need to insert our new field. So at the top of this file, I'm going to import that new dependency. So I'm going to import CK editor from the dependency itself, which is CK editor for React. And I'm going to create a new piece of state. So I'm going to say const, and I'm going to call this my product description. And I need to create that update function. So I'll say set product description. It's going to equal the use state hook, which is going to by default equal an empty string. And then I'm going to come down, and underneath the price form input component, I'm going to render out CK editor, right? Which is going to be very, very simple and easy for us to do. And it allows us to call the onChange event, right? It is going to pass the event, and that will allow us to call our set product description function. And we are then going to target the event.editor.getData, and we're going to call that as a function, and that is going to pass us back the data that we need. I'm also just going to add a line break here so that there's a bit of space between the editor and the button. Okay, so let's actually look at this in the browser. Okay, so I'm logged into my admin account. I'm going to come into my admin, and I'm going to go add new product. And you can see that I have my new field, which is a Wysiwyg editor. It allows me to enter rich text. So I could enter bold text here. So this is an example of bold text. Underneath that, I could write some standard text. So, this is some info. I could create a numbered list. So, first, second, third. I could create bullet points. Here is something. If I wanted to, I could add more styling, formatting. I could make this full width so I had more space. I could go into the source code, and you can see that it's writing HTML for me. There is a lot that you can do with this Wysiwyg editor. But of course, at the moment, although it appears in the UI, we're not actually going to do anything with that within our collection within Firebase because it's not coded to. So what we need to do, and as you can see here, we have our form which calls handle submit, and this is a very simple function. It just dispatches an action which passes the various data we want to store within our collection. So we want to now pass that additional description that we've created. So we're going to pass product description, right? And we're going to store that in our collection. When the form is also submitted, we also want to reset that value in the form. So we'll say set product description, and we'll call that and reset that back to an empty string. But if I just take you to this action, which is the add product start action, let's just run through this and make sure everything is going to work as we expect. So add product start dispatches add new product start and passes the product data. That's fine. So let's now go into our product saga and look for that. So we have, where is it? On product start, which calls add product. And as you can see here, we're manually, we're destructuring from the payload the values. Now I could handle this in a number of ways. I could manually say product description here, and that would be fine. But rather than that, for a little bit more flexibility, what I'm going to do is just destructure the entire payload. And then I'm going to spread that in to the handle add product helper function. And these are the two custom fields where I'm getting the user's ID, and I'm also creating a new timestamp, so that's fine. But I'm going to spread in the entire product object, so that what that means is that if in the future I add more to this, it will automatically be passed to my saga, rather than me having to come back here every time and pass that manually. And again, if I click into this, again, this just takes the entire product. So I don't need to do anything further here. That looks good. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to test that. So I'm going to create a new product. And I have some lorem ipsum text, which I'm just going to paste in here. Let's maybe make this bold and add some custom styling here just to see how this kind of looks. Okay, yeah, that looks pretty good. And finally, I'm just going to click on add product. Okay, so as you can see, this is the product with the product description. If I actually show you in the console and I show you the our current state, our Redux store, you'll see that we are already fetching the product description from Firebase. So we're actually ready to render this on the page. So what we're going to do is come over to our text editor, and we're going to return over to our product card component. So let's go back into components, product card, and go into our index.js file. And we want to destructure from our product description. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new list item underneath our add to cart button. And I'm just going to render the product description. And I'm going to show you what happens. And as you can see, although it renders, we are rendering the actual HTML tags, which isn't really what we want. We want those tags to be used as actual HTML, because that's what it is. The Wysiwyg editor that we're using, which is CK editor, will actually create rich text for us. It will create all the HTML to style the text as the user creates it. So to do that, what we need to do is come back over to the text editor, and rather than just render the description, we're going to create a span. And what we're going to do is we're going to dangerously set inner HTML, and we're going to set the HTML value to be that of the product description, right? So what we can now do is come back over to the browser and see the difference, and you'll see that the HTML is now actually rendered on the page, right? So for example, if I inspect this element here, you're going to see that this is within a H3 and a strong tag, which is bold. We have paragraph tags. So it's actually inheriting the real styling. If you wanted to target this more specifically, we could even add a class name here, call it description, and you could target this within your style sheet. But for me, this looks absolutely fine. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this video tutorial. Just to recap what we've done, we have updated our search results to allow users to click on products and click through to a details page. On that details page, we render the product thumbnail, name, price, an add to cart button, and the product description. And of course, if we review the backend, we've also added CK Editor, which is a rich Wysiwyg editor to allow users to enter rich text into the product description. Before I sign off, I just want to remind you guys that at the end of each of these videos, I'm creating pull requests and I'm merging my code into the official GitHub repository for this project. As always, I will be posting a direct link in the description of this video to this repository for you to check out. I'll also be posting a direct link to the official YouTube playlist for this series where you can reference previous videos and future videos. But of course, as always, I just want to encourage you guys to check out my YouTube channel. Please check out my other videos. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And I look forward to working with you in the next video.